Hello, middle schoolers. This is my dog, Cooper. Cooper, you're so cute. Say hi to the middle school students. Oh, I guess he's not very talkative at the moment. So, I've been having a lot of technical difficulties. So, I'm only going to do part of chapter 3, and then I will do a second half later. So, at the end of chapter 2, the friends had gotten back to Oak Grove, and they were sitting on top of the welcome sign. And here we have a picture that shows a flooded out street. So, chapter 3. By afternoon, the sky had begun to turn blue, and the three friends had dried out on their perch above the sign. Trout had made a sling from Martha's mother's shawl to ensure that her arm would be protected from further harm until they got to Jock DeMarsh's. "We're still just as far from the ocean as ever," Martha said. "There go your dreams." "I'm starting to think that my dream is real," Trout said, as he looked out over the water. "I remember being in the ocean. I remember our mother tried to protect us from a speedboat. When a speedboat came too close and the propeller hit her." Trout might have recalled more if he hadn't heard someone shouting, "Save me!" from a boy screaming as he was dragged along what used to be downtown, but was now downstream. It was Richard Grady, who had so enjoyed calling the McGill brothers names. One minute, Richard had been riding his bike, taunting the cat stuck up in the trees, and laughing at folks who were bailing out their basement, and the next minute, Penman's Creek had overflowed and been washed away. Sorry. Like most of the children in this dry town, he'd never learned how to swim. Now Richard Grady held tight to his floating bicycle, thrashing and screaming, certain he was about to drown. "Help me!" he called to the friends on their perch. Before Martha could call back that Richard had better ask nicely if he wanted their help, and apologize for every nasty word he'd ever said, Trout jumped into the water, cutting through the current as though he were indeed related to his namesake. He grabbed Richard by the sleeve before he was washed into even deeper waters, and Eel jumped in after his brother to help haul Richard to the safety of the Oak Grove sign. When Richard climbed up, the sign shook under his weight, and Martha had to hold on tight with her good arm. "A thank you would be in order." Martha advised as Richard Grady wiped the water out of his eyes. "Oh yeah, sure, thanks." Richard was still in shock by how quickly the world had shifted. 6 feet of water where before there had been none, and those he least expected to save him becoming his rescuers. "I hope you regret calling the McGills all those horrid names," Martha said. "I don't know about that." Richard peered into the water. "I still don't think they're exactly normal. You may have noticed they're not coming up for air." Martha saw that indeed. Trout and Eel disappeared in the murky water. The oddest things were floating by: flower pots, trash cans, dog houses, and mailboxes. But there wasn't a glimpse of the boys. Martha grabbed Richard by the collar of his soaking shirt. "Where did they go?" she demanded, her voice shaky. "Under the water." Richard seemed a little afraid of how upset Martha was. "I swear, they were there 1 minute and gone the next." Martha jumped down from the sign to find that the water was now much too deep to stand. She took a deep breath and went under, straining to keep her eyes open, frantically searching for her friends. She worried what tragic and watery scene might greet her. But there the boys were, swimming underwater, having the time of their lives. When they caught sight of Martha, they waved. But Martha couldn't wave back. She had lost her balance and been pulled into a whirlpool, a spinning circle of wild water right at the corner of Elm Street, where Penman's Creek ran into the gutters. With only one strong arm, it was impossible for Martha to break free of the whirlpool. She felt herself going down and saw a bit of her life race before her eyes: her father's kind face, the yellow stars of a summer night, her mother's cool hands when Martha was little and suffering from a fever. Maybe these images helped her to think fast. Before she could be carried away, Martha pulled off the sling that had been made of her mother's shawl and lassoed one of the posts of the Oak Grove sign. The silk shawl was surprisingly strong. Not even the whirlpool could take Martha away. It took only a few seconds for the McGill boys to swim to Martha. One blink, and there they were, helping her into calmer waters. "Are you okay?" Trout asked. Despite the pain in her arm and a tight feeling in her chest, Martha nodded. She had let go of the shawl when the McGill boys had pulled her to safety, and it hung on the sign like a banner before the waters washed it away. Martha felt tears sting her eyes. "Boy, oh boy, I thought you were a goner," Richard Grady called to Martha from his perch. "Then why didn't you help?" Martha called back. As the McGill brothers guided Martha onto the only high ground left, a stretch that ran parallel to Main Street that had been a hill before the flood, Martha thought about how comfortable trout and eel seemed underwater. They looked as though they were somewhere they finally belonged. From high on the hill, the friends had an even better view of the town. They could hear people shouting and calling for help. Even Richard Grady, now alone on the sign, was worried. "My father said the water will keep rising until the wall at the creek is taken down," he said. "Then the water could flow out of town, the way it used to." Trout and eel looked at each other. Even though they knew it had taken Charlie McGill and his crew 2 weeks to build the wall, Martha could tell what the McGill boys had in mind. She would have helped if she could, but it was clear she could never keep up with her friends, not even if she had the use of both of her arms. "Good luck," she cried, as the boys dove into the water.